Well, I got involved in music very early in life. I think I started playing in fourth grade and did the usual, you know, grade school band and then high school band, and I was the drum captain, and we marched and we played concerts, and I went to the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl and all that. But my dad asked me if I'd like to have more serious lessons to learn, to be a more accomplished musician. And I said, yeah, because I really liked it. And so my first, I guess you'd say, professional who taught me was a guy named Stanley Leonard, who was the timpanist with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. And Stanley introduced me to all the other percussion instruments. Up to then, I just played the drum, the snare drum or the bass drum or whatever. And I was fascinated. I loved it. I loved the xylophone and the marimba and the timpani and the bells and the chimes and on and on and on. So he took me through all that, and he also started me on piano lessons, which I was hopeless at, but he started me on it. My father, he was a businessman, so he said, I think I'll ask his teacher if he actually has the stuff to make it as a professional musician. And Stanley said, he wasn't sure, but he thought I probably could if I worked real hard. So I auditioned for 3 different music schools, and the only one I got into was the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so they were glad to have me. So I went in there and I just started studying on a Bachelor of Music program. And my teacher, of course, was Ed Woobold, who was a percussionist with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. And presently, they needed a symphony orchestra never hires like a whole battery of percussion players. And what they do is they have like usually 3 principal percussion players, 3 regular percussion players, and a timpanist. So if they need extra percussion, like if they play pieces written in the 20th century, for example, they have to hire extra guys. So I became the first guy, I guess the guy that would get most of the work. So it seemed like I was playing every week, and so and I got to go on a world tour with him in 1966, and we went all over the place, the Orient and Europe and so forth, and it's a great experience. So at that point, I realized that's what I was going to do. The problem is, somewhere along the line, I got how should I say? I got tired of the symphonic mode. In other words, all the music was old music, and I felt like I was in a museum, and you're looking at old paintings, the great masters. Nothing wrong with that. Wonderful stuff. But and I love some of that music then, and I love it today. Maybe even more today than I did then. However, as a percussionist, and especially a young guy who was interested in the avant-garde, the new stuff, come on, let's go, there just wasn't much. So their idea of a modern piece of music was something written in 1911, Stravinsky or Villalobos or something like that. So I decided to pursue a career out of Cincinnati. And so I applied to and got a scholarship to go to Manhattan School of Music to work on my master's degree in music. And so that fall, we went over there to New York from Cincinnati, and I hooked up with a full load of schoolwork to get the master's. But also my teacher was a fellow by the name of Fred Hinger, who had been the timpanist with the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra. In my opinion, he was the greatest timpanist to ever live. And I had previously tried to get to be a student of his when he was in Philadelphia at the Curtis School. And that was one of the places that I didn't get to go to. And the reason was, he said that I was very talented, but I was too far along. He wanted a musician that he could mold from the beginning a little more. So I was both glad and sad. I was glad that I had some proficiency in the percussion instruments, but I was also sad that I didn't get to study with him. Well, lo and behold, next year, he decided to go to New York to play with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. And he took an assignment with the Manhattan School of Music to be a percussion instructor. So it was perfect. I got to study with him. And what was even better, I didn't have to take my lessons at Manhattan School of Music, which was way up in Spanish Harlem in New York, not a very nice place at that time. But went down to Lincoln Center, where the opera played, and so I used to get down there to take my lessons. So about that time, my wife at the time she was a caseworker, a welfare worker for the state of New York. And she met another gal that was doing the same thing by the name of Patricia Kunk, K-U-N-C. I'm pretty sure you heard the name. And he was the recording engineer for Frank Zappa down in Apostolic Studios in New York. And they were doing a lot of work. And so she told his wife about me, and she told her husband about me. And so he had us over for drinks one night. So we got to talking, and he was really impressed with my background. Along the way, I'd played 6 months with John Cage, and I did a lot of interesting, new music, and some that was even newer than new, and I had a certain anyway. So it kind of gelled, and so I remember at the end of the evening, I said, "Look, and I didn't know that much about them, and I said, if you need some, somebody to play some percussion parts, let me know. I could use the work. I could use the studio work, And he said, well, he sure would let me know,